Hello everyone, and welcome to the 10th video in this EB2 NIW series. Yay! All right, thank you to my viewers, those that have reached out to me as well to let me know how useful and helpful this video has helped them in their self-petitioning. Thank you for reaching out to me. My own goal is to assist you, to guide you, to make the complex simple. And it's my desire that your petition will receive approval. In my last video, I talked on part 1 of on balance. It would benefit the US to waive the job offer requirements and the labor certification. This part is always confusing to people. They don't know how to do it. They confused it with other parts, which involves the well-positioning or the advanced degree professional. Remember that this part is one of the parts that you have to present in your petition. In fact, it's the third prong that is required. So if you have not watched the last video, the part 1 of this, please kindly do so. There, I laid the foundation on what this is all about, having a very good understanding, and that can help you to write a compelling session. Remember, everyone's case is different. Tell your own story. And many of my viewers are yet to subscribe. Why? Please kindly click on the subscription button. Why not just use that to support Prof. Dan? It doesn't bite. All right, so in the last video, I ended with a sentence. I said, you need to provide substantial evidence and expert opinions to support your case. This particular section or chapter is very important, and you can leverage on what your recommenders, your experts in your field, what they've written for you. Remember, you also submit a recommendation letter, which I've also conducted a section on that. You can check my videos on the playlist of this EB2 NIW immigration. I have a playlist, and I advise you to follow them or watch them accordingly. So I'm going to be quickly practical about this, but again, disclaimer, this is just a guide. Use it as a guide. Derive an understanding, an idea of how you can present yours. Don't use what I'm providing to you right now. Don't use it verbatim and use it to write yours. It doesn't work like that. That's plagiarism. You copy, and this person's case has already been approved. If you do the same thing, it can be dangerous. So be wise. Just use it as a guide. Let's quickly look at the content of this person. The colored yellow part for this person decide to do it this way. It's like a recommendation, a snipe of the recommendation. One of this person's recommender, Mrs. X, identifies Mrs. X. So let's look at what it says. From the contents and programming perspective, Mrs. X worked collaboratively with the team in the development of the extensive 3-week agenda for our Kickoff Summer Institute, which revealed the theoretical underpinnings of the project through our framework of culturally responsive education, explored ways we can broaden our perspective to change engineering culture, connecting engineering to culturally responsive actions, building a community of practice, and designing engineering experiences through the framework. So yeah, this sentence is trying to elaborate on what Mrs. X is doing or has done in the team. So this is a recommender writing about Mrs. X, and Mrs. X is the owner of this petition writing about it. And so she coined part of the recommendation letter and put it here to show that, see, look at what an expert in my field is saying about my work. And importantly, look at this part. It says, Mrs. X's voice was critical in structuring activities that met the stated learning outcomes and had a clear line of connection to the intended program objectives. Again, one particularly notable contribution to our program development was how Mrs. X helped structure conversations to understand what engineering is beyond our national context as a mechanism to exploring new pathways towards engineering. This kind of thinking is really key to broadening participation on a large scale. Then you have reference letter. You can put the name of the recommender here. So this is like an open statement for this session that this recommender, Mrs. S, is trying to present to compel a case on what an expert says. Then let's look at the next line. Please read this carefully. The labor certification process predominantly assesses the minimum requirements that does not consider the nuanced intricacies of an individual's exceptional abilities or outstanding track record. So, there is labor requirements. And this person is trying to say, see, I do not need a job offer for you to grant me this NIW immigration. And so this person is saying that, see, in the real requirement of this labor certification process, they, only consider minimum requirements. Perhaps this person is trying to say she has more qualities above that minimum requirements. And so she's drawing the attention of the immigration officer that will be assessing this case that, see, I have exceptional abilities and I have outstanding track records that are not always listed in the labor certification requirements. And so, you might consider that, tweak the sentence and see how you can use it to your advantage. Of course, Mrs. X field is engineering. So let's see. Engineering education specialization, an emerging field, comprises peers with mainly technical engineering expertise, right? But the petitioner is saying our own professional acumen, our specialized expertise, and our profound knowledge position her in an echelon above our peers. And she also referred to C chapter 1 and 3 for details. So this person has already laid the foundation in earlier section of a petition to show that, see, she has more quality, more qualifications than other persons who are peers in this field of our proposed endeavor. That's what this person is saying. So again, the colored one shows another reference from someone else saying that Mrs. X stands out as one of the most exceptional students I have encountered in my years of teaching and research. So I guess this recommendation will probably be from Mrs. X professor. So if you have a recommendation from your employer, for example, you could put it there, whatever they say about your unique work, as backing up this part of your petition. We go further. Mrs. X's impressive academic trajectory, degrees and certification, and as an author and several academic research and leadership awards stand as a testament to our unwavering commitment to the transformative sphere of engineering education. So these credentials, coupled with our hands-on involvement in groundbreaking, nationally funded projects, make a compelling case for why the factors favoring the waiver far outweigh the need for a job offer and the accompanying labor certification. Again, I believe that with these, you'll begin to grasp or have an idea of how you can write this, trying to make your case. That's all. You're just trying to make your case. Some of these things, you've written about them in previous section, like the advanced degree professional, like the substantial merit and national importance, like the well-positioned to advance the area of proposed endeavor. Again, that doesn't mean you should just say because you've written about those areas, then you don't write anything about this part. This part, you are still trying to convince You are still trying to convince. If you don't convince the officer in charge of your case at this stage, you pass the earlier sections and you don't pass this section, you will still be denied. You must pass all the sections. So we go further. Let's look at an expert opinion again. I want to emphasize that Mrs. X is a key associate on 2 ongoing national projects. For this project to continue to record successes, Mrs. X's key role is essential. You see such a reference coming from a recommender saying that they are working on a national project. So, do you have any projects you are working on in your team or even at your workplace? Just try to write about it. And so, our contributions, again, this is from the recommender, our contributions are substantial compared to those of our peers, both citizens and non-citizens, with similar educational training. Mrs. X combined engineering and project management degree and global work experience set her apart. It is rare to find someone with such an astute background, keen abilities, and drive to excel. These are not the words of Mrs. X. These are the words of Mrs. X recommenders. And what Mrs. X has done since she self-petitioned by herself, writing all this by herself, is to bring out some of the things the referee or the referent, some of the things written in the reference letter and just put them here and speak to them further. Again, Mrs. X says, my proposed endeavor is supporting the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, PCAST, aiming for an additional 1 million STEM professionals by 2025. So this is this person's area of proposed endeavor, and she has brought out a substantial claim from the President's Council on what they've also said about a field. And so she presented that and a lot more. There are more things here, I believe. This is just a snipe just to serve as a guide, you know. So so basically that's the idea. That's the idea of how you can present this session. The urgency of my contributions cannot be overstated. As the US grapples with the need for a diverse and inclusive STEM workforce, my research and projects directly address these national challenges. Mrs. X is addressing issues of national importance, making her presence and contributions critical to the future of US engineering education. Again, another recommendation contents. Mrs. X role within the name of, I removed that. So look at what Mrs. X has done again. So Mrs. X obviously has worked as a work experience. And so maybe one of our recommender wrote this. And so Mrs. X just bring some content out of that to say that, see, my recommender says that, who is an expert in my field, says that my role within the organization provides high impact contributions to the field, and it goes further. So again, utilize your recommendation letters, not just they write it and that's it. You can, bring out some of them to support your case. And I hope that will be useful to you if you can use it wisely. So the US can gain from my unmatched expertise. This person is trying to sell herself. You see, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to convince the officer. So the US can gain from my unmatched expertise and commitments to nurturing the next generation of engineering leaders by granting me the waiver of a job offer requirement. Considering my involvement, past achievements, and the importance of completing other phases of these strategic projects. So obviously, this Mrs. X is still working on some projects, and Mrs. S has written about them in previous sections. And so Mrs. X is just trying to re-emphasize on all that. You get a picture? So Waiving the job offer and permanent labor certification requirements would, without doubt, make the project continue to successful completion and ensure that the U.S. funds meet the necessary goals. So you are working, you have a work experience, you are an employee in a company, and you have a job role, and you guys are doing something, and if you guys don't do that thing, there will be, lack of production, or certain things won't go well. And so you're trying to say that since you have a role there to play, without you being there, some of these things will lack progress. So you try to sell your case. So basically, I want to believe you've gained an idea on how you can write this session. Again, this is just a guide. You can write it in your own way, your own tone. Just make sure you respond to the question and you convince the officer in charge of your case. Finally, I merit the National Interest Waiver due to the unique depth and breadth of my contributions in this nationally critical research domain. It would be exceedingly challenging, bordering on the impossible, to identify another person whose work parallels the significance and impact of mine. Hence, the labor certification process should not be used in my case. It would benefit the US to waive the job offer and labor certification requirements. I hope this is useful. I'll advise you to pause where you have to pause, look at it, think about it, align it to yours, and see how you can write a unique session for this. Again, I wish you all the best, and